Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show.
Find the best podcast topics your audience actually wants to hear. What a novelty. Having topics that people want to hear about so you can actually get some people listening into your show. Well, how do you actually achieve that? Well, in all seriousness, there are lots of points that we're going to go through in this episode of Podcast Done For You, the show. So here we go. Let's start off with the first and most important thing. Start off with what your listeners actually say. Like, don't do things in your words, use their words. Go and look for what they are looking for. I mean, yes, you can go through search engines and look at what are the most common topics that are around the particular area you're talking about, but get the language right. Because the difference between you saying one thing and them thinking another word can be all the difference between whether you're going to get listeners or not. So make sure that even if you type in a particular title and you see something similar come back in Google, it's a good tip to think that that may be the terminology that your clients are actually using rather than the phrases that you might be using. So it's a good thing to type that into Google and see what you get back. Subtle little things like whether you're talking about a particular phrase or another, or just the way you switch things around can make all of the difference. So let's go to tip number 2, because there's a lot to get through in this. Number 2, when you are starting to prepare for topics that your clients want to hear about, make sure that you have taken some notes during the calls that you are making and the conversations that you are having and the direct messages that you are having with your clients. Why not see what they are asking about? They're asking you questions all the time. You're having conversations all the time with them. What is it that comes up? What actually are the pain points that they're referring to? Because that's a real good insight as to what are the topics that you might actually want to discuss in your podcast episode. That extends to when you are actually meeting with them and you're going through things. What are the pain points that are coming up? And I'm going to use that term pain points many times during this episode, so pay attention to it. You see, you really have to think as well about the personas. Now, we've had previous episodes where we've talked about building a persona for your client base. And one of the things you need to know is, what are their pain points? There's that term again. What are their fears, their frustrations, their aspirations? You've got to look at what are those points that matter to them. What are the things that are really having an impact on them that can provide, in some cases, some small wins? Remember, though, that when you're talking about all of this, you want to talk to the stories. Ultimately, you don't want to tell them how to do it, because that's the reason you're in business, of course. So it is showing an understanding of what they're talking about. And then ultimately, we're going to come to it, sharing some stories about it, because that is what is relatable. But let's get back to the essence of this, choosing your topics for your podcast. So we've sort of inferred it a little bit earlier on, but use SEO to find out what people are actually searching for. All of those common tips as far as SEO is concerned extend to your podcast as well. And you can also do that by looking in to the search engines in Apple Podcasts, in Spotify, as well as on YouTube, and of course on Amazon as well. You get to look and see what are the topics that come up when you start typing in something. Whilst many of them are not sophisticated search engines to the degree that Google and YouTube are, they certainly will give you some insights about what is actually coming up when you raise certain topics. It may give you an insight when you go and see, has that particular show been popular for them? Why not learn from them? See what you can find out as well. Now, there are many tools out there that can also help you as far as SEO is concerned. Now, I'm no expert in SEO, but I can tell you if you use things like Answer the Public and also ask.com, you can get some deeper mapping that'll come in handy there. Also, don't be afraid to potentially use some of your AI tools that you've got out there that might be able to do some deeper research to find out a little bit more about those topics. Now, take it with a pinch of salt. You don't know where it's actually searching and what it's doing, but it will give you some insights along the way as to what you might be talking about. And remember, you are looking to word it in the way that your audience wants to hear about it. That is why you do the persona building, so you actually understand who they are, what they're about, and the way they might word something. It can be very specific to a particular niche or an age group that you're looking at, so make sure you keep up with the terminology that resonates with them along the way. So now if we get to number 5, pay attention and keep some observations of what you notice every day in content patterns that you're seeing in your industry. What are the breakthroughs, contradictions, surprising results, any of those things that you're seeing along the way? That can come up in all sorts of areas in social media, in general news feeds. So pay attention to those things, take a note of them. One of the things that I am going to advise you to do is make sure that you keep, now whatever takes your fancy, whether it's a physical notebook or whether it's in your phone or whether it's on your computer in a document, find a place where you can store all of this, because I guarantee you in day-to-day, if you train yourself to think about what are the things that come up, you will have so many ideas that will come through for you as to what to include in your podcast. Now, here's one that I alluded to again a little bit earlier that I think is perhaps the most critical. Turn your stories and experiences into episodes. That's right. Tell stories in your episodes. So what are some of the great stories that you tell all the time? What are some of the stories that you tell every now and then? What are the stories that came up in the past week that you just interrelated with someone? It could be something new. It could be something old. It might even be someone else's story that you're retelling in a different way, but you want to put a spin on it with your own experiences and insights. You're demonstrating to the audience that you understand, yes, wait for it, their pain points, and that your story is going to talk about how you resolve that without telling them exactly how to do it. You might want to share with them some insights, some outcomes, what might have happened if this didn't happen, what did happen because that happened. All of those kinds of things are part of the story. Remember, the stories is what people remember. They do not remember on how to do things. That's going to bore the pants off them in a podcast. You want them to remember these great stories that you can tell. Shared little insights along the way can make all of the difference. Now, I've got a favorite story that I've told on many occasions, for example, about a turning point in my career, which happened not because it was an actual moment that was all that significant in the day-to-day or in changing the course of my career at the time anyway, but it was a moment where I was asked by the CEO to basically engage with a client and be the middle person between a sales team and an operations team and work out what was going on and work out how to resolve it. Now, I won't go into all of that story right now because that's not important to this particular episode, except to say it was an important lesson in communication for me. And it is picturing yourself in those moments and sharing those stories, which can make all of the difference. In that particular case, I'll let you in on a secret. I was actually standing over a gravesite. That was a pretty horrendous way to do that, one of these kinds of things, but it was someone who was upset over something that had happened in the course of a funeral. And so we got to that point. We resolved all of that quite nicely and easily. And then that has certainly given me topics to discuss as far as communication are concerned in podcasts. Learned a lot of lessons from that particular one. And again, remember the story. So let's keep going along to some of these because there's a lot to get through. And I want to make sure that in the course of the stories, you do refer to any breakthroughs that you have had, much like I've just said to you there. Okay, let's get to number 7. Let's watch what's performing in your niche, then do it better, right? That is a simple tip for you. Watch what is happening, do it better, because you've got some terrific insights and you've seen what else other people are doing. Now, whether it's your competitors that have got a show, whether it's other shows that are unrelated, doesn't matter. Whether it's in the news, whatever it is, and you've heard and seen a comment, see if you can do something that's better, elevate it, take it to the next level. Don't do it exactly the same as them. Just give it your own little spin and utilize that topic. There are many people that have done really well over the years in doing exactly that, seeing what is happening and responding to it. And that goes on to number 8 here, which is using trends, news, and industry shifts for timely episodes. So it's one of those things as well that there are certain things that you know are going to happen. So I'm going to say the obvious. If you're an accountant and you're talking about, you've got your podcast, then obviously there are certain times of the year where there are tax times. So that's an obvious point where you might be timely in leading up to that. Other times it might be trends. It might be something in the news cycle, particular for your industry. It could be shifts in the industry, all of those kinds of things. Take those opportunistic moments and write a podcast topic for you to cover an episode on. Now, if you are recording ahead, make sure that you are thinking ahead as well. You might have to pick some trends, but you might also have to have some flexibility. If you see something come up in the news today, you think there may be a really great opportunity to capitalize on it, well, throw your schedule out the window for a moment, jump in there, record a podcast, even if it's a quick one, even if it's just you and a co-host like me, and we can get that resolved really quickly and make you timely and in the news. And that gives you an opportunity as well to potentially go out there and share that with news organizations and get more publicity for yourself along the way. So whilst that is not necessarily the primary motivation for why you would select podcast topics, it certainly is a little bonus for you there. If you've got things that are newsworthy, whether it's they're literally in the news at the moment or things that are coming up and can become newsworthy, don't forget to share it with media agencies, whether that be something particular to your industry or broader media, whatever it is, share it with them and tell them you've got podcasts coming out about that topic. They may want to have an article from you or have an interview with you to talk about that particular topic in more detail. You could become their expert. They could very easily share your podcast with them, and you'll find very quickly your audience will start to grow with people you never knew were potential clients of yours. So make sure that you are looking at some of the things that are evergreen as well. Don't just go to everything that's trending, because the problem is it becomes out of date very quickly. And that the same sort of goes for things that might be a bit more experimental, things that, could be something in terms of innovation, but could also go out the window tomorrow as well. You want to find the evergreen topics, those pain points. Yes, those pain points that keep coming up in the news in lots of different ways. So let's go to number 9 here, and we're nearly through this. And don't forget, by the way, stay tuned to the end. We've got something we're going to mention for you. You'll be able to go and get additional information that will help you in creating your podcast topics for your show. So ask your audience directly and listen with precision. In other words, why not go out to something like your email list and ask them what their biggest challenge is right now. Ask them what they would like you to cover in a podcast episode. What would they like you to talk about so that they can share it with other people? There's a great tip for you as well, because if you have clients that are in businesses that employ several people, chances are you haven't met all of those people in the business. And therefore, the podcast episode can be something they can share with their team. They can share it with their other clients. It makes you much more referable when you are talking to topics that they want to have covered, because they can easily share it without necessarily saying, hey, you should go and buy from this person. But it is worthwhile to them to say, here is a great coverage of a particular topic. You should have a listen to this podcast. They're not selling you per se to go and buy from you, but they're introducing you via the very wonderful medium of podcasts. One of the reasons why, no doubt, you are doing the show. So let's get to number 10 here on the list. I want you to build a system to capture, track, and organize your ideas on a day-to-day basis. That is referring back to what I was saying a little bit earlier and touched on, whether it's a notebook or in your phone or in a document. I want you to make sure you're tracking those things. So it's one thing to write your ideas down, but I want you to actually track them so you can see what topics are trending. Are there things that keep coming up? Are there stories you keep sharing? Are there things that are going to be prime candidates for you to talk about in a podcast? Now, here's another little side tip as well for you when it comes to this stuff. Just because you've covered it once does not mean you cannot cover it again. Absolutely cover it again. Cover it 3 or 4 times if you need to. I'm not saying do it every week for 6 weeks. Otherwise, it's going to bore people. But if you cover a topic once now and in 3 or 4 months' time, you cover it again, but in a slightly different way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes there are updated stories, there's updated information, there's a new take, a new idea that you'll have. There's no reason why you can't keep expanding on it. It is one of the beauties of podcasts. And I want to add to you as well, if those of you that might be an author out there, if you have written a book, then the podcast is a great way of expanding on that. So use the chapters of the book to start off how your podcast is going to go. You can also work that in reverse, by the way. If you are planning a book, then why not start off with the podcast, explore those topics, turn that into the book and expand from there. Or, as I said, the main way is you can find in a podcast, you can tell lots of additional stories that you do not have time for in a book. So one can complement the other really nicely. So there's some definite ideas for you to follow. Remember that if there is an idea out there that someone has given you for a podcast, acknowledge them and use that as well, because it is really powerful to say a story at the beginning of the story about the pain point. For example, yesterday I was talking to John, and John mentioned that he was really struggling with how to get topics that were really relevant for his audience to make his podcast really grow and thrive. Well, we've taken John's advice, and here is the podcast episode. That is a great way of getting into things. So there are lots of things here along the way that you need to pay attention to. Now, remember this. If you want to find the best podcast topics, pay attention. Teach yourself to listen. Make notes along the way. There are all of those tools that I talked about, and I promised you something special at the end. Well, I'm going to give that to you now. If you go to the show notes, you are going to be able to download a copy of a workbook that we will generate from this episode that will include all of the tips that I've been through, some steps for you to take, some action plans, some key quotes along the way, lots of important information for you to follow, because I know you're probably out there and listening to this while you're doing a million other things. These are the notes that you can have to make your podcast that much better. Of course, what I do recommend to all of you is that if you want help with these things and everything to do with your podcast, that's what we're here for at Podcast Done For You. Go to the website, podcastdoneforyou.com.au. The details are in the show notes as well. We take care of everything. We will handhold you to make sure your topics are relevant for your audience. We'll help you extract those stories that are really going to engage your audience. So please, as well, if you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We love your comments and your feedback because, hey, how are we going to find the pain points and the topics that you want us to cover in future episodes? Share your comments, send me a direct message via social media, particularly via LinkedIn. You can find me easily there, connect up with me. And I'd love to have those things come through to me, and I'd be happy to share my insights in a future episodes of Podcast Done For You show. Until next time, make sure your podcast is doing everything it can to thrive.